Howdy once again everyone, and today I'm excited to be testing out another of Voigtländer's premium and well-regarded lenses designed for mirrorless cameras, the Voigtländer 65mm f2 Macro APO Lanthar. It's available for Sony E and Leica M mount cameras, it produces a full frame image, it's a manual focus lens, and at $950 or about £750 here in the UK, it's a little on the expensive side, so I can't wait to see if all the good reviews I've read about it are correct. I'd like to thank Voigtländer's UK distributor for loaning me a copy of this lens for a couple of weeks for testing, although as usual this is a totally independent review. I'll be snuffling out both its strengths and its weaknesses. This is a semi-macro lens, getting you a 1:2 magnification ratio, so macro photography purists may be a little disappointed, but ultimately it's still getting you really nice and close to small subjects for some really fun images. And that 65mm focal length and bright maximum aperture of f2 means it can be easily used for everyday subject photography too, even a little portrait photography, that is if you don't mind focusing manually. When it comes to the lens's build quality, it's very much like the Voigtländer 35mm lens that I tested a short while ago, except, of course, much bigger and heavier. At 625 grams, or about 1.5 pounds, it's quite a hefty piece of engineering. It might have a slightly old-fashioned looking aesthetic design, but it handles like a dream, right up there with the best quality manual focus lenses in the world. It's made of metal throughout, with a beautiful brushed black finish, and everything about it feels rock solid and built to very tight tolerances. Voigtländer make no mention of weather sealing for this lens, and there's certainly no protective gasket around the rear lens mount. Something you can see here though are electronic contacts. As I mentioned, this is a manual focus lens, but it does still communicate electronically with your Sony camera, and resultingly has a few useful tricks up its sleeve. Firstly, if your camera has in-body image stabilization, then you won't have to manually set its focal length because the lens feeds that information to the camera. Secondly, when you turn the manual focus ring, which works incredibly smoothly and precisely by the way, not only does the lens barrel extend a lot, but your camera can automatically switch in to manual focus assistance, which speeds up the focusing process a little. You may not always want that feature though, and you can turn off manual focus assistance in the camera's menu. As you can see here, the lens has issues with fairly heavy focus breathing, zooming in as you focus more closely. That's just par for the course for a macro lens, I'm afraid, and I can reassure you that I cleaned my camera's sensor after getting this footage. Thirdly, although the aperture is controlled manually on this lens using a ring at the front with perfectly weighted clicks every third of an f-stop, the camera knows what aperture you're shooting at and will report it back in EXIF information, which is all very elegant to see. The lens comes with a little metal hood, which will offer little protection from bright lights in itself, but the optics are quite deeply recessed anyway into the lens body. Its filter thread size is 67mm wide. Overall, this is one of the nicest handling manual focus lenses available really. Not only is the build quality superb, but the way it electronically cooperates with your camera is very nice too. Alright then, image quality. I'm testing this thing on a Sony a7R III full frame camera with its full frame 42MP sensor. In-camera corrections are turned on. At f2, we straight away see razor sharpness and good contrast in the middle of the image with no colour fringing. And over in the corners, the same, literally razor sharpness, although at that maximum aperture there is a touch of darkness from vignetting, but there's also no colour fringing. The lens stays this sharp down to f11 or f16, where some softness from the effects of diffraction creep in. Well, overall, my assessment is quick and simple. This is a ridiculously sharp camera lens, straight from the maximum aperture and across the entire image frame. Your only restriction to getting sharp pictures here will be your ability to manually focus. Let's take a look at vignetting and distortion now. These images are taken with in-camera corrections turned off. The lens projects virtually no distortion at all. However, at f2, the corners look pretty dark, suffering from serious vignetting. f2.8 looks better, and at f4, vignetting is mostly under control, so it's average vignetting here but pleasingly low distortion. Now let's take a look at close-up image quality. With its 1:2 magnification ratio, the lens can focus down to 30 centimeters, which is loads of fun. At f2, close-up image quality remains very sharp, although if you stop down to f2.8, then the maximum amount of resolution is visible again. When shooting at close distances with any lens, diffraction begins to soften your image a little sooner, and so at f8 we start to see a little softness emerging. At f11, f16 and f22 the image quickly softens. However, that is normal for any lens, and so this lens's macro ability can be considered excellent. Now, let's see how the lens works against bright lights. It's a performance on the good side of average here. Flaring makes itself felt, but only really when a bright light is right there in the picture. Now, let's take a look at the quality of this lens's bokeh. Autofocus areas look beautifully smooth, no problems here. Even very challenging transitional areas, as you can see, are rendered very softly. And finally, related to bokeh comes longitudinal chromatic aberration. This lens carries an APO or apochromatic designation, and that designation bears out in real life as we don't really see any colour fringing at all on autofocus highlights, even from the maximum aperture of f2. Overall, well, I was starting to wonder if Voigtlander's APO Lanthar lenses are one of Germany's best kept secrets, but then I remembered they're made in Japan by Cosina nowadays. Well, anyway, the glowing reviews of this lens seem to have been justified, as it really is a world-class optic. Razor sharp, no chromatic aberration, excellent handling and close focus ability, tough build quality, it's all there. If you can get your head around the slightly unusual but still very versatile 65mm focal length, then this is a super rewarding lens to use, and it comes highly recommended. Thanks for watching everyone. I have been itching to put this particular lens through its paces for a long time now, so it was my pleasure to check it out for you. If you find these reviews helpful, then do check out my Patreon page. There is a link in the description below. Supporters of this channel get all kinds of exclusive bonus content and of course, eternal happiness and supernatural joy. Eternal happiness and supernatural joy not guaranteed.